Welcome to Driven, the Unscripted Success podcast, with your hosts, Mike Menino and Nariman Hamden, bringing you insights and stories on achieving personal, professional, and financial success.
Hey guys, I'm Nariman Hamden, and this is Driven, Unscripted Success podcast. We've got an awesome guest on today. We have Dr. Steve Paul, who is an MD and is the founder and chair of the board at Seaport Therapeutics and a venture partner at Third Rock Ventures. Dr. Paul is also a founder and chairman of the board at Report. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Rapport Therapeutics. You got it.
There we go. And he has over 40 years of experience as a physician scientist specializing in neuroscience and molecular. Did I pronounce that word right? That's a tongue twister.
You got it.
Molecular neuropharmacology, as well as CNS drug discovery and development. How are you doing, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing great, Nariman. Good to be with you.
Thank you for coming on. I know you've got a busy schedule, so I'm really excited to have you be a part of the show and just share with our guests what you do and who you are. So if you want to just kick things off and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'll do that. Thank you. Good to be with you again. I'm actually sort of a brain doctor. I'm a psychiatrist, neurologist. By my clinical training, I work with patients who have everything from depression to schizophrenia to severe anxiety disorders to even Alzheimer's disease, which is more of a neurological disorder. Over the years, I've gravitated towards doing more research that is involved in discovering and developing medicines, drugs that can actually treat these various conditions. And spent my formative years at a place called the National Institutes of Health, which is a large government-sponsored research organization based in outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland, and spent 18 years there and led a fairly large program dedicated to these various diseases. And then I moved, I call it to the dark side. I moved to industry. I moved to a large pharmaceutical company called Eli Lilly, which is based in Indianapolis, but it's a multinational company. And they had just launched a few years earlier a drug called Prozac, which you may have heard of. Prozac was the first successful, what we call antidepressant of the SSRI class. And it sort of became an iconic drug. It really helped to destigmatize mental illness, in this case, depression, so that people could talk about it. They could say, they weren't embarrassed to say I had depression or I needed treatment. Very common disorder, by the way, affects about 6, 7, 8% of the population. Almost 20% of Americans will have a episode of depression in their lifetime that will require treatment. So it's a very common disorder. And this particular medicine sort of opened up the path to develop other medicines for severe mental illness or psychiatric disorders that were disabling. And so I joined Eli Lilly back in the early 90s and kind of led their programs. We launched another drug to treat depression, another drug to treat schizophrenia, and a very novel drug to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, which is common, as you know, in children and young adults, and even in adults, actually.
Oh, sure.
And very common. And so these medicines, they really, really help patients. I often remind people they're not the only treatments. Like most medical conditions, medicine helps and is a good part of the treatment, but there are other things that people need to do, like say if they're depressed, psychotherapy helps and, behavioral therapy. And there are all kinds of things that you need to do to get people better with these conditions. Medicine is one important part of that, but it's not the only part.
Sure. I would think that it's also, your diet, being active as well, are big factors in that as well, on top of the medicine.
Exactly. And also how you deal with stress and how you cope with stress. So but having said that, these medicines have been godsends for people who suffer from illnesses. Now, we're talking, when you talk about depression, we're not talking about somebody who's, sad because of some event and it's short term. We're talking about somebody who has this disorder we call depression, which just kind of keeps them from functioning well. Unfortunately, a lot of times people who have severe depression, if it's chronic, they'll think about self-destruction, self-harm, suicide. And as you know, suicide rates in this country are actually going up, not down, in contrast to many conditions, if you will. In fact, there are more suicides in the U.S. than there are homicides. We don't think of it in those terms. So these drugs are helpful, but as you say and point out, there are a number of things that people need to do in addition, potentially, to taking a medicine.
Sure, absolutely. So, when you think back, are there any moments that you'd say really changed the game for your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you should say that. I mean, like many people, when I was in medical school, I had a couple of professors that were mentors, people that kind of took me under their wings and helped me and got me excited about certain areas of neuroscience or brain science. And, I mean, those were very, formative years where, frankly, had I not done what I did back then, and I was like 20 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old, probably wouldn't have ended up doing what I'm doing today. And so, as you get a little bit more towards the end of your career, kind of one third. The first third was kind of education and, all of the things that go into the first 25, 30, 35 years of your life. And then the second phase is that phase where, you do try to accomplish things. And, if you're successful and lucky and fortunate, you get things done. And then I'm sort of in the third phase now. I kind of tell people I'm sort of playing with house money now, right? Kind of thing.
Sure.
And so, yeah, those early days, I had a mentor, a very famous scientist. His name was Julius Axelrod, and Julie was my NIH mentor. When I went to NIH, I went there as what we call a postdoctoral research fellow. So I was, after I got my MD, after I did some training, and now I wanted to train as a scientist. Well, to do that, you go and you do that under the guidance, if you will, of some senior person. And this person had won the Nobel Prize in 1970, which was pretty cool.
That is pretty darn cool.
Yeah, and I got an opportunity to work in Julie's lab at NIH, and that's where I sort of cut my teeth, so to speak, in doing research, bench research as well as clinical research, and stayed on at the NIH, which was just a wonderful place to do science, to do research in those days, and then decided, 1992, 1993, at the ripe old age of 42, I decided I would go try my skills at discovering new medicines. And that's when I moved to Lilly. Okay. And met some great people there that were mentors. My old boss was the head of R&D at Lilly, a guy named Gus Watanabe. He was a cardiologist, very famous cardiologist. Again, took me under his wings. It's so often that you find that people help you in your careers, which is one reason we need to give back to others, right? We need to mentor others. And so I'm attempting to do that more and more as the older I get. And then, what I spent 17 years at Lilly, wonderful years, and decided, could I start my own company? Could I do my own? I had sort of an entrepreneurial bug, if you will, and I kind of wanted to do my own thing. So I retired at the ripe old age of 59, which is pretty old, and decided I would go start my own companies. And so I moved to Boston, which is kind of like a biotech center of excellence, a hub, if you will, connected with a couple of friends that were venture capitalists, so they had money. And I co-founded several companies. I've now co-founded, gosh, a total of 6 companies, I guess, and 5 of them are public companies. So we took them public. They're traded on the stock market and the stock exchange. You can buy it. I'm not advertising, but and developed really so far 2 new medicines that have been approved by the FDA. And one you might be interested in or might not is the first and only new medicine to treat something we call postpartum depression.
Wow.
So 1 in 8 women who are pregnant and have a baby will suffer from postpartum depression. And that, that can be a very disabling condition, not just for mom, but the baby and the whole family. And in fact, it's the most common complication, serious complication of pregnancy. And there wasn't any drugs to treat it. And we figured out how to make one, craft one, based on the physiology of what happens during pregnancy and what happens when the baby's born. Hormone levels go up and then they drop off precipitously. And we've discovered that that drop off is kind of a trigger in some women to develop this condition we call postpartum depression. So if we gave that hormone back, it was a very complicated story. I'll just sort of summarize. We give it back and then tapered it over time, we could very rapidly and effectively treat symptoms of depression and anxiety in women who had this condition, and within a matter of a few days, and then the treatment ends after 2 weeks. And then usually for most women with postpartum depression, it doesn't come back until they have another baby, until they have another pregnancy. And then, of course, it can come back. But the good news is they still have this new medicine. So that was kind of a fun day in my life when that drug was approved. It's not easy to get drugs approved by the FDA. So that was pretty cool. It was on the national news, on NBC and CNN, and it was a fun couple of days.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was one of those women that went through postpartum, and let me tell you, it's not fun. That's for sure.
It's not fun.
And at that time, I mean, the doctors didn't know what the problem was, so it's like, oh, here, take this pill, try this pill, try that pill. Next thing you know, I'm just a zombie and just useless, so that's a huge game changer. So well done with that. That's massive.
And it's out there now, and it's helping a lot of women. We get nice reports. It sort of, the irony of it was my daughter, my second daughter, Jordan, you may have met her. She actually developed postpartum depression on her second pregnancy. And this was before we had this medicine, though. Okay, this was a few years before. And my wife and I were, living away. We were in Boston. She lives in Indianapolis. And we had to come home and, help take care of her. And she had an older son and this new baby boy. It was really quite disruptive, quite disabling.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I completely understand that. It's a tough position to be in, and going through it personally, it's you don't understand what's going on. Like, you have this beautiful bundle of joy that just came, but then you're resenting it as well, and you're resenting my husband at the time, and everything around me, and it's like, I can't do so. That's a big game changer, and that's going to help a lot of women. So fantastic. So, everybody hits a bump in the road every now and then. Can you share a time where things didn't pan out and how you got through them?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the business I'm in, discovering new medicines, the failure rates of these things are really, really high. When we start out in what we call early discovery phase and try to advance something, only about 10% or less of new medicines that start in the beginning ever make it across the finish line and get approved by the FDA. So failure is something you live with each and every day. And of course, you live for those successes, that 10% that make it, so to speak. It's a tough business, and you lose them at all different stages. And it can get a little depressing if you're, It's, why get in this business. But anyway, it can get a little depressing unless you just kind of step back and realize that that's just part of the business. The other thing about my career is, when I transitioned from academia, from NIH to industry, and then from industry to biotech, every single transition, was sort of anxiety provoking. I was getting out of my comfort zone. I knew what I was doing. And people, even friends of mine, said, well, why would you leave NIH to go to a drug company? That's ridiculous. And I didn't know exactly. And then why would you leave a drug company, big job? I was head of R&D at Lilly, doing quite well, and go out on your own and try to do this from scratch, right? I went from having a big budget at Lilly to basically being a professional beggar trying to get money to do my companies, right?
Sure, which isn't easy to raise that capital.
Well, you know what it's like, and so, but I think the key learnings for me were, getting out of your comfort zone, doing something that you really feel passionate about, even if you're not sure you're going to succeed or not, is the only way to live your life, really. If you live it too conservatively, you'll have regrets. I could have stayed in the government as a government employee until I retired. Wouldn't have been terrible, but I would have always said, well, did I miss something? I could have done something that I had really aspired or dreamed to do. So I even my kids, I tell them, look, if I had one regret, it was maybe I should have done what I did earlier in life, right?
Sure.
But you have a family, you have kids, you have
sure
mortgages to pay, bills to pay.
Right. You have to be conservative, and you have to be cautious. And so it's nice that, at 59 years old, you decided to, take that risk. And, it's your kids are have their own families. You're at that phase in life, and it's paid off. So that's pretty exciting.
It has. We just, the second drug, that first drug was really cool. And just recently, a company that I was CEO of and was involved very intimately in the research, we just got approved another new drug for treating a very serious condition called schizophrenia, which affects about 1% of the population. It's not a great thing to get. This is one that you don't want your kid to get. Okay.
Definitely.
And the drugs for treating schizophrenia have pretty much been the same since the first one was introduced back in 1952. So for 70 years, we've been using fundamentally the same mechanism. And this company, and it was based on some work we did at Lilly early on, and based obviously on this new company. A company was called Karuna, which stands in Sanskrit for compassion and action. It was kind of a cool name. And we developed this new drug for schizophrenia, and lo and behold, we were able to get it approved by the FDA, the very first new drug, mechanistically speaking, to treat this severe psychiatric illness, this severe mental illness, in 70 years. And it was a little bittersweet. The company was acquired. It was bought by a large company called Bristol Myers Squibb, which is based in New Jersey, big multinational drug company like Lilly. And they ended up buying this company so they could commercialize this drug. So in a way, it was sort of nice to see that recognition. By the way, the FDA did approve the drug, but a little bittersweet that we're not involved in it much anymore. So, but
got it. But you've definitely developed quite a few fantastic drugs that were much needed. Schizophrenia itself. I'm shocked to hear that there was nothing else developed in 70 years. That's such a severe disorder, and like you said, it's not fun. So
right. Exactly.
Wow. So what's a skill or habit you think doesn't get enough credit for contributing to your success?
Well, I think taking risks. On the one hand, you could say maybe I didn't take enough risks, but on the other hand, a lot of people at age 59 wouldn't be thinking about going off and starting their own companies. They'd be thinking about, playing golf or, doing something.
Retirement.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think the sort of entrepreneurial bug, spirit, risk taking, I think those are things that I feel very good about. The other thing is you learn pretty quickly in the business world, but also in the science world, that you have certain skills, you have certain things that you bring to the table, to the party, so to speak. But the trick is to find other people with complementary skills who are even smarter than you are, that can help.
Sure.
And try to create sort of a team effort. We call it sort of group genius. Get other people that are very smart, focused on the right thing. And I think I've been relatively successful in doing that, and I feel very, very good at it, because sometimes you think, well, maybe I'll just do it all myself. But there are very few things that people can do all themselves. I mean, if you look at
Sure.
successful business people or people in science, it's often colleagues, collaborators, team members that really help get the job done.
Sure. Basically masterminding, getting in a mastermind group and bouncing ideas off one another,
Exactly.
and then it makes you much more creative, because then you're seeing a perspective that you didn't even think about, and vice versa. So yeah,
Exactly.
I'm big on mentors and mastermind groups, and just collaborating and bouncing ideas off, and just it's humbling for, especially when you're set
Yeah.
in this tunnel vision of, no, this is what's going to happen. They're like, well, yeah,
Yeah.
but so
Yeah.
yeah, I totally
Well,
agree
and,
with
and
that.
the other thing, Nerman, is maybe this is just a lesson I've learned along the way, is to be grateful for
Sure.
what you have. And there'll always be somebody, more successful, wealthier, whatever, than you. There just will be. And so you need to step back sometimes and say, look at all that I've been able to do. And part of it, you have to feel, luck plays an important role, right? You want to be out
Sure.
there, you want to work hard, you want to do your best. But let's face it, sometimes why you're successful is a little inexplicable. There's a fortuitiveness, there's some luck, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, to it.
Sure.
So I'm into the mode of feeling grateful for everything that I have, and that's a cool thing too.
Oh, for sure. My brother years ago said to me, when we used to run a lot together, and I was really, really training for a certain race, and really it was more so about being competitive with myself on a certain time I wanted to get. And then I got a little too tunnel vision in it, where I wasn't enjoying, the process of getting there.
Right,
And
right.
he just said to me, he said, listen, you have to remember, there's always going to be somebody faster than you, and there's always going to be somebody slower than you.
There you go.
So just be
Exactly.
happy with where you're at, push yourself, but don't get lost in that. So yeah, so
Good
that's something
advice. Good
that was
advice.
good advice from him, that's for sure. So how do you encourage your team to think outside the box and bring new ideas to the table?
Well, that's a great question, and an important attribute, and an important thing to do. And the process of sort of scientific inquiry, like today, is where you have a senior scientist, myself, let's use that as an example, and you bring younger people into the lab. And these can be graduate students, these could be postdoctoral fellows. I didn't mention this, but I'm also a professor at Washington University in St. Louis of neurology and psychiatry. I have a lab there, and
Well,
we have,
that sounds like fun.
yeah, and 6 or 7 people, and you bring these very bright people in, and you try not to, excuse me, try to ruin them by telling them what to do, but guiding them and letting their creativity, contribute to what you're doing scientifically. And it's often some of these orthogonal crazy ideas that turn out to be the most important ideas, and so you don't want to squelch that, you know what I'm saying? And so you got to facilitate it. So yeah, we do have I would say a culture of creativity and of out of the box thinking that's essential for pushing the boundaries, if you will, of science, and that's something the better scientists all do.
That's awesome. That's got to be fun being a professor and in that lab with all these youngins, I suppose I will call them, and I mean, do you look back and see yourself in any of them at
Well,
that age
yeah,
when you first started out?
yeah. As I said, and we talked about this earlier in this podcast, in this conversation. You go back to when you were 20, 22, 23, 24, and just starting in a lab, and think about all the things that you were allowed to do that helped create who you are 50 years later.
Yeah.
And so, now I think a lot about the folks that are that age or even younger. I've got some really bright grandkids. I mean, most people have bright grandkids, right? But
Sure.
mine are particularly smart,
Not
and
biased at all.
not biased at all, and trying to facilitate their careers, their progress in life and professionally and personally, and that's kind of what it's all about, I think.
Sure. Encouragement,
Exactly.
encouragement. So share with us what does a day in Dr. Paul's life look like, and how do you juggle work and everything else?
Yeah. Well, I'm an admitted recovering workaholic. Okay, so
Not you.
yes, me, yes, me, and so even at the ripe old age of 74, I still work 8, 9, 10-hour days. And today would be an example of Zoom calls like this one, not so dissimilar, starting at 9 a.m. and going to at least 5. Okay. A lot of it is, work that I'm doing at various companies, scientific work. So it's stuff that I really like. And the older I get, I just have decided I'm not going to do anything I don't like, which is kind of like what you do when you're at work sometimes, right?
Sure.
And so I pick and choose, and if people ask me to do things I don't like, I just say can't do it. So their days are busy, and then I sort of relax in the evenings, have a nice dinner, watch TV, catch up on the news, and catch up with family. But it's still pretty busy for me. I wish I had more hobbies. I don't. I'm starting to play pickleball a little bit, which is fun.
Oh boy.
Uh,
You on the circuit as well?
yeah. So that's cool. And as well, I have a home in the Caribbean, which I don't get down to as much as I'd like, but I really enjoy going down there as well.
Yeah, you can't complain about the Caribbean, that's for
Nope.
sure.
Nope.
I mean, it's another world.
It's
So,
really nice. Yeah.
it sure is. So has there been a book, a podcast, or someone that's really changed your outlook or approach?
Has there been a book, a podcast? Nah, not really. I read a lot, and I kind of assimilate things from various sources. I really stay up on politics. I guess it's a bit of a a hobby, if you will. And as you know, politically things are like kind of wild right now, kind of stuff. And so, and I don't want to go into political persuasions here because I might offend half your podcast viewers or watchers or whatever. But I really stay up on current events, and but I'll admit a lot of what I do every day is kind of scientifically oriented stuff that I enjoy doing. But I'm also involved in working on some boards and starting to get more involved in some philanthropic stuff, which I'm starting to really enjoy more of.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's doing more of what you like,
Yeah,
you know, and
exactly.
giving back and just having that gratitude, you know,
Exactly.
for the fruits of your labor and hard work.
Exactly.
So how do you tackle learning new things, especially stuff that's outside of your comfort zone?
Yeah. Well, that's another great question. So I am not that computationally oriented, to be blunt, but I've started to get involved in teaching myself about artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Excellent.
And I even started a company with some very good people that know something about artificial intelligence and machine learning that's actually based in California. And what we're doing is we're taking what we call routine scalp EEGs, where they put little electrodes on your scalp and they record your brain activity. EEG has been around for many, many years, but to the naked eye, it's hard to really figure out what's going on. But if you use machine learning and what we call deep learning, you can deconvolute this activity, these electrical signals that come from your brain, and you can do a lot of cool things. You can diagnose diseases. So I've been doing a lot of work recently on teaching myself about machine learning, which is not easy at my age, particularly since I have trouble turning on my iPad. So, it's not like, it's not like second nature to me. In fact, when I have a problem with my computer, I ask my 12-year-old grandson because he can do it.
Oh, they're tech whizzes.
They're tech, and he doesn't have the patience to tell me how to do it. He just says, "Move over, I'll fix it for you, and then I'll see you later," kind of thing.
It's that social media
Yeah,
attention span.
yeah,
Everything's gonna go fast, fast, fast. That's great. I
right.
always go to my. I mean, I've gotten better with technology and whatnot, but I mean, for the longest time, it was constantly, "Hey, Luke, come here. How do you do this?" It's
Exactly.
like, "Mom." So I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're wired with it. So, managing finances is crucial both in business and in personal life. So, how do you approach financial planning to ensure stability and growth in both areas?
Oh boy. Okay, let me think about that one for a second.
That's a mouthful.
I'm, I kind of, it's when you think about financial planning at certain my age, you think about a couple of things. One is you think about, how do you kind of create a diversified portfolio of investments? So things that are kind of conservative, right? Like, you don't worry about losing money, right? So
Sure.
big chunk of money that goes into things like treasuries and municipal bonds and stuff that just generates, some decent return, not extraordinary, versus, doing something in the stock market or something along those lines. And anyway, and then you think about, things like, estate planning and, how to make sure that, your legacy is passed on to your kids, your grandkids, et cetera. So that's kind of what I spend my time doing. I'm not a very risk-taking investor. I even worry about the stock market. And well, and it's ironic because the companies I start, biotech companies in general, are pretty risky. They're pretty risky.
Sure.
So I guess
Sure.
I've bifurcated my portfolio. I've got these conservative investments and then the investments I make in my biotech companies, which are riskier, but with potentially much higher reward, right? You
Sure.
take the risk, but there's the reward. And, so far, not every company I've started, co-founded, or invested in has succeeded, but the ones that have been really good, really, really fortunate.
That's wonderful. That's what I stopped looking at my stock app. I think last week I had enough looking at because I have high risk stocks. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna keep that one face down.
Yeah. Well, the market's down like, I don't know, 15%, 20%. I mean, so you don't want to look at the stock market right now
No,
unless
no.
you figured out which ones to invest in. And most people aren't really good at picking stocks, to be honest.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I have a few and they're high risk and I'm holding off. So I've been told move it into here and do this. I'm like, nah, I'm just going to wait it out and see what happens. So
Yeah.
we'll see. So, it sounds like things are going well. So what's another form of, I suppose, do you invest in real estate as well? I know you have,
Yeah.
homes or whatnot, but as far as like investments.
Yeah. I like real estate projects. And so, usually these are investments that I can enjoy, but they're investments nonetheless, things that renovating, this wonderful new place in the Caribbean, took a nice home and made it into an even nicer home.
Oh, you did a spectacular job.
And things like that. I started doing a little investing in real estate in Miami, not far from where you are, across the other side.
What are you investing in out there?
Well, this is a new home that's going to be in South Beach, but it's pre-construction, and I've invested in. Now someone else, thank goodness, is building this one. I don't want too many more headaches. The one in the Caribbean was enough. Was a great, we had a really good general contractor. Don't get me wrong, but anytime you renovate, construct, there are surprises, right? And they're usually not pleasant surprises, right? It's going to take longer and cost more than you thought it was going to be, right?
Absolutely, and especially being on an island.
Exactly. Finding people, good subs, good plumbers, good electricians. Those are not easy to find, particularly on an island in the Virgin Islands. So, but no, I do like construction, and we made some real estate investments recently, and we'll continue to do a little bit of that. It's it's a different market, different cycle, but it's fun. So I'm doing a little of that as well.
That's great. So as we're wrapping up our interview, what exciting plans or initiatives do you have in the works for the next 6 to 12 months? What's going on in Dr. Paul land?
It's a great question. So, to be perfectly honest, I'm going to start another couple of companies. I'm working on 2 or 3 right now.
Of course
that's exciting. And then, as I mentioned, I think I'm going to try to spend a little more time in the Caribbean, and I may get a little more time in Florida as a result of this other project that I've got going on. But as I said earlier, I'm sort of playing with house money, so hopefully we'll be able to continue to do what I'm doing and get a few more good years out of it.
Good. That's fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on. So if anybody wanted to get a hold of you or follow you, how do they connect with you?
Well, I'll give you my email address if they're interested. Is that okay? Is that legal? Okay, good. SMPaulMD, SMPaul, PAULMD @gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks, guys, for tuning in. And if you want to get a hold of Dr. Steve Paul, send him an email. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nerman. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Thanks for listening to Driven, the Unscripted Success podcast. Want to share your story? Apply to be a guest at drivensuccesspodcast.com/guest.